everyone, welcome to the August 19th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I am David Aragona, and today we're going to be taking a look ahead to Saturday's card at Saratoga. It's Alabama Day, and we're going to focus on the late pick 5 sequence, races 7 through 11, which does include that feature race, the Grade 1 Alabama, that top-level race for 3-year-old fillies at the meet. Probably not the most interesting wagering affair with regard to that race, as Nest looks like a heavy favorite, and I guess unless you're trying to beat her, you're going to have to get a little bit creative other places in this sequence. But we will talk more about the Alabama as well as the 2 other stakes races in this sequence. They are also running a pretty interesting edition of the Grade 2 Lake Placid, with the favorite With the Moonlight wheeling back on pretty short rest after her victory in the Saratoga Oaks a little bit earlier in the meet, and the Smart and Fancy, a turf sprint for the filly and mare sprinters. That one came up a super competitive race, so we'll talk about that as well. Sequence does not get too easy with the races that bookend the pick 5, as we've got a 2-year-old maiden race to kick things off, and things close out with a seemingly competitive conditional claiming race to end it in race 11. Now, my usual co-host, Craig Milkowski, he's on vacation for about a week and a half. He's actually going to be up in Saratoga Springs this weekend, so I hope that Craig has a great time up at the Alabama. But I've got a guest on to join me to talk about this pick 5 sequence on Saturday, and that is a handicapper who I enjoy discussing the races with, who I know can offer some valuable insight, not only about handicapping this card, but also about how to construct your tickets, and that is horse player and host of the Better Betting podcast, Eric Rubin. Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to have you on. I've listened to your podcast a few times. I know you've had me on once, and I really enjoy the discussions that you do about how to construct your tickets, the best ways to go about that, kind of finding the ways to extract some value from these. So I'm looking forward to talking about how we can put this together to hopefully guide people in the right direction, because you do have to get a little creative in a sequence like this when you have a horse like Nest that so much of the play is going to go through.
Yeah, I assume, 80-90% of the tickets at least, if not more, will have Nest on it. So if you could beat Nest, you're going to get paid. If you can't beat Nest, I almost would treat it like a pick 4 if you go with Nest and bet it more like a pick 4. But we'll talk about that as we go through it.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the handicapping, I just want to briefly let you introduce yourself. Just talk a little bit about, your background in racing, how you got into horse playing, handicapping, and just kind of give people an overview of your podcast.
Sure. I started playing the horses probably when I was about 13 or so, illegally, I'm sure. But we had a family friend who's my dad's age who would take me to the races. I actually introduced him to you briefly, if you remember, at Saratoga a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So he would take me to the races, and I'd go with my parents. We'd usually go to the restaurant at Aqueduct because that's the only way I can get my parents to go to the races. And just from there, it grew, and I enjoyed going. I grew up about 10 minutes from Belmont Park, so I was a regular at Belmont Park, and we've been going up to Saratoga probably since about 1992, every year other than the COVID year, and just really enjoying my time up there as well. And about 2 years ago, with COVID, we were kind of sitting home, a little bored, and my co-host, Gary Quill, before we started the show, I had become friendly with Gary, and Gary does some TV work down at Timonium. He's kind of like the Maggie Wolfendale of Timonium, for those new at Timonium, so we call him the King of Timonium. And he'll be doing that again this year. So if you follow the Timonium feed, you can check him out. And we were like, hey, let's do a podcast, because there's a lot out there on handicapping, but there wasn't a ton out there on how to bet the races. So our podcast kind of does a lot of handicapping, maybe more than we should, because there's so many alternatives that are great, like your show. But we really try and focus on the betting, as you mentioned. So it's called Better Betting. Anyone want to check it out? We covered the Queen's Plate this week. So if you want to listen to it, we're happy to have you.
That's awesome. I always love to hear about how people got into horse racing. The person that kind of introduced them, that's usually the case. You need somebody to kind of bring you in and show you that there's, how to do things. So I enjoy that. And yeah, your podcast, I think, is really valuable in the sense that a lot of people, as you say, they focus so much on handicapping the races, and ticket construction or putting together successful plays is often kind of an afterthought, and people can have a really great handicapping opinion, but capitalizing it by choosing the right bets and constructing them the right way way can be a challenge for a lot of people. So hopefully we have some time to talk about that on this podcast. We are going to try to start things off with the handicapping, though, to kind of go through our opinions in this sequence. And it begins with race 7. That is that 2-year-old maiden race. It's a 6.5 furlong maiden special weight with 8 runners signed on, just a couple with experience, both of those hailing from the Todd Pletcher barn, and I guess that's a good place to start. Do you often try to assess how strong the race is based on those with experience and how they've run? Or, do you look at the first-time starters and just try to think, they win a lot of these races at Saratoga, so that's a place where I want to focus a lot of my play?
Yeah, unfortunately, I rely a lot on workout reports for the first-time starter races, which I mentioned before. I can't really help with yet because they didn't come out yet, or at least I didn't get them yet. But no, I definitely look at the horses who ran before. And generally speaking, if I like horses who have run before, I'll lean on them. And if I don't, I'll look for a first-time starter alternative. And as you mentioned, at Saratoga, there's so many horses that are geared for this meet, and they want to, I guess, showcase their first-time starters. So often they do well. But I still think experience matters in these kind of races.
How would you assess these 2 Pletcher horses, Summon Your Courage and Bat Flip? One obviously has a lot of experience for this stage of the game, Summon Your Courage already having 3 starts under his belt. Bat Flip, kind of the opposite of that, a horse that does have a start under his belt but looked extremely green in that race, so you'd have to hope for a much more professional effort this time.
Yeah, and I prefer Bat Flip out of those 2, definitely, especially if you're getting a little better price. And you mentioned basically Bat Flip only had the 1 start, and that's a 4-horse, by the way. He only had the 1 start, and he spotted the field about 4 lengths. And I don't know if you watched the head-on or you saw the replay. I'm sure you did, but I thought another horse kind of came out at him, and it wasn't really his fault. He didn't start sharply, but he kind of got cut off a little bit at the start. So I don't necessarily think he has a problem starting. If he did, I might be more reluctant. But after spotting the field, and then I really didn't ride him. He was kind of like standing, I felt, most of the race. So I think he's going to run a lot better, and that's a horse that I'm going to use in this spot. And for the 3, Summon Your Courage, I know he has the experience advantage, but I haven't seen the improvement from him necessarily. I know there wasn't much of a pace last time that he ran, but I don't know. I just think Backflip has a higher upside, and I kind of think we see what Summon Your Courage is. So I would lean to Backflip and maybe a few other first starters here.
Yeah, I kind of do agree with that. I had trouble separating these 2, but I generally do kind of veer towards the horse that has the upside, and it feels like that is Bat Flip. I saw a lot of the same things you did. He did get a pretty, I'd say, tentative ride from Irad Ortiz last time, and some of that may have been due to the fact that he was getting out a little bit. I mean, he was extremely wide all the way around the far turn. It appeared to me like he almost was trying to avoid the kickback to his inside, like maybe just trying to keep him out in the clear after he appeared to get a little bit green on the back stretch, but he lost a ton of ground in that race, so we'll see if he's able to do better. I didn't love the way he was working coming into that race, so I don't want to go too positive on him because I still have some questions about this horse's overall ability, and we'll get to the first-time starters now, and I think there are some that are working pretty well coming into this race, and I feel like the one that is going to end up taking a lot of money is the number 5, Echo Again. This is a horse that I've been waiting to see show up in the entries ever since I started kind of watching these workouts on XBTV at the beginning of the summer. He worked in company with a horse that did not run well for Steve Asmussen when he made his debut, I think in late July, in that race that captured the flag one for Shook McGahee. But that horse, whose name is escaping me now, worked with Echo Again, and Echo Again was clearly the star of that July 18th workout, as he just opened up on that foe in the early stages and was never asked for anything to achieve that 1-minute clocking. You can also watch one more of his workouts on XBTV. That was his August 7th drill, which was in company with the 3-year-old Favorite Outlaw, who is running, I believe, in race 3 on Saturday. That horse broke his maiden with a 95 buyer, and to my eye, Echo Again was going a little bit easier than that horse. So feels like this Son of Gun Runner might be a pretty good one for Steve Asmussen. Definitely getting some very live vibes from him. I'm not going to be surprised when he really ends up taking all the money in this race because he just has those appealing works coming in here. But there are definitely some other pedigrees in this race. The number 1 Expected Value for Chad Brown and Klarovich Stables. Another horse with some nice workouts. not consistently strong in the works. Some are better than others. I would say that work two back, not particularly impressive. He was second best to a filly that's debuting on Sunday, but looked a little better in that August 14th workout. Definitely seems like one that's going to want to go longer, but does have a little bit of speed. And then towards the outside, Eric, we've got some big pedigrees, but feels like horses that might want some more distance down the line.
Yeah, I know the was it the 8 horse? I can't see my writing. Classic Legacy is a half to art collector.
Mm-hmm.
The mom was very good, but kind of more long on the turf. So what you said is probably accurate about wanting more distance there. And you mentioned Echo again, so I don't know the 5 horse. I don't mention much, but I know both Sibs won their debuts, or 2 Sibs won their debuts, including pneumatic dirt sprinting. So I'm sure. I think you nailed it right with the morning line. That 5 is going to take a lot of money, I'm sure, in this spot.
Yeah, and just generally with first-time starters and the stories at Saratoga, horses that have those really strong workout reports, how confident do you feel leaning on them in a pick 5 sequence like this? Do you just try to spread a little bit? Because these horses, it seems like sometimes the hype machine can go into overdrive and they get bet down a little bit too much when you have some positive reports on these firsters. But sometimes the stories do prove to be correct and we see some pretty good ones debut up in Saratoga.
Yeah, I use workout reports more to eliminate horses, I think, in these pick 5 sequences. So, for example, let's just say the 2 horse gets a C plus workout on the DRF workout report, and that's kind of consistent. I'll just eliminate that horse. And let's say the 1 gets like a B plus. Again, I'm making the letters. They're not necessarily getting these grades, which is a very good workout report. I won't necessarily automatically use that horse, especially if it's the first leg. I'm different than most people, I think. A lot of people like to look who's taking money and they lean on those horses. I'm kind of the opposite because if the horse is taking money, maybe the horse is live, but they have to win so often to get your money back that I'd rather not do that. Just the other day, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, we had a first-time starter, Todd Pletcher, who had a great workout report, took a ton of money, was like even money or less, and he ran up the track. And the 1 horse, I think was a Bill Mott horse, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, who had solid, consistent workout reports, ended up winning it like 12 or 13 to 1. So, yeah, the workout reports definitely help, but more for me for eliminating horses and falling in love with horses.
Yeah, that race on Wednesday was kind of a funny one. I think you described it pretty well. That Bill Mott horse actually was working well. I think people got a little scared off by the Bill Mott firster on Sunday that looked like a stakes horse coming into that race based on the way she was working and ran up the track, didn't do anything. And I guess people kind of went off Bill Mott altogether coming into that race. But he apparently does still have some good ones in his barn. And that filly looks like she could be a nice one. Yeah, just to cover a few more horses in this maiden special weight, Shug McGahee has a couple of runners in here, Spinzar and Game Change. Both of them feel to me like horses that are going to want to go a little bit longer. I've watched a couple of Spinzar's workouts. Gray Son of Tappet, who just looks like 6.5 furlongs is going to be a little bit on the short side, but there is good pedigree in the second generation. The second dam is Fleet Indian, who was 13 for 19 in her career, earned a 112 buyer. I believe she won I want to say the personal ensign in the Beldame. She was a really nice horse, but again, a horse that wanted to go a mile and an eighth, a mile and a quarter. And with those Tappet and Medaglia d'Or influences in there, you would think that this one wants to go farther too. The horse with the kind of the precocious pedigree, I should say pedigree for speed, is the number 2, Good News Rocket, who is from that Bill Mott barn, a son of Ron Happy, who sold for a lot of money as a 2-year-old in training, $700,000. Very impressive workout, 10-1 at that Fasig-Tipton Gulfstream sale. The workout times on paper appear to be very fast, but I will say he was getting outworked by a few of those fillies that we were just talking about. Padma outworked him. She was the one who was second in that Wednesday maiden race, and he was also outworked by Uppercase, that filly who looked like she was going to be so good on Sunday and didn't do any running. So just interesting workout notes on Good News Rocket, who has gone fast in the morning, but I think has just been paired with some pretty nice fillies in the Bill Mott barn. So we'll be interested to see who takes the money in here and who's ready to fire on debut. Let's move on to race 8, and we'll get the stakes portion of this pick 5 sequence started with the grade 2 Lake Placid. This one going a mile and a 16th on the inner turf course, and Pretty interesting entrant in this race in the number one with the Moonlight, just for the sheer fact that she's wheeling back in only 13 days. Not something that we see North American connections do that often, but I know it's a little more common in Europe. And Charlie Appleby, pretty soon after the Saratoga Oaks, basically put it out there that they were considering coming back quickly in the Lake Placid. So it's not like this was some sort of last minute decision. She's doing well right now, and I guess they want to strike while the iron is hot, as opposed to waiting for a longer race like the Jockey Club Oaks at Aqueduct. How do you view her coming into this race, the unknowns of the short rest, and also her turning back to a shorter distance?
Well, if you asked me this question about 24 hours ago, I would have been like, I'm a little concerned. But yesterday, Mexican Wonder Boy came back on short rest, and I thought he laid over the field, and he was 5-2 or so. I'm like, oh my God, that is a great price on this horse. Probably lone speed. I think he's the best horse. He dueled Sibelius, who's a great horse, in my opinion. And I'm like, he's coming back on short rest. I'm not going to bet. And of course, he wins easily. So, having said that, now I think that affected me on with the Moonlight. I don't know to answer your question, to be honest. I think the horse is the best horse in the race, unquestionably. The fact that the horse got all let me ask you a question. I'll be like a politician. I'll turn your question into a question. The fact that the horse got all lathered up, and do you think it just like took a lot out of the horse, and she might not be ready? To me, I'm not that worried, generally speaking, about the short comeback. So I'll answer your question. I'm not that worried about it. What about you, especially because the horse sweat so much and looked like maybe it took a lot out of her?
I will say I was at Saratoga on that Sunday of the Saratoga Oaks, and I would say most people there, most living beings there, were pretty lathered up. It was just an extremely hot day. So, I mean, I feel like when it's in the upwards of 90 degrees, you're supposed to see horses sweating a little bit, and I think she is just generally a high-strung sort. I think both Charlie Appleby runners that ran this or a couple weeks ago, they have a propensity to sweat up a little bit. I think that was also the case when they train in the morning. So I'm not too concerned about it if it's something that they often do, and she obviously ran well after that. So I'm going to assume that they wouldn't be running her back here if she had come out of the race poorly or if she had lost weight coming out of the race. I mean, there's not a huge amount of incentive to run in the grade 2 Lake Placid, so I would just imagine that she's doing well if they're even going to show up here. So I'd be more concerned about the cutback in distance than I would her condition coming into the race, because she is a horse that really did come to hand going those mile and a quarter, mile and 3/16. She seems like one of these grinding sorts that doesn't necessarily have the turn of foot, but can be pushed on from a long way out and keep finding through the stretch. So I do worry a little bit about those when they turn back, but she definitely drew the right post position over the inner turf course.
Yeah, I know the inside. You've been tweeting a lot about it. The inside's been the place to be. So we'll see. She definitely can win this. She's probably the best horse in the race. But like you said, between the short cutback, turn back. I'm sorry, the short comeback off of short rest and the turn back. We'll see how she does. I kind of am going to go in a different direction. Not that I don't respect with Moonlight, but I'm always trying to beat favorites anyway. And this is a tough race for me because there are two horses in here that I love that I'm not going to be betting. The first one is the 5 Dolce Zell. This is a horse I had Seth Merrow on my show or our show a few months back when we were covering the race at Tampa. That was in March, and I introduced the race by saying, "How much is Dolce Zell going to win by 5 or 10 lengths?" I loved her so much that day. I loved her European race. So I followed this horse. I love this horse. To me, she was an easy single last time, even though she barely got the job done. I got lucky. But I'm going to go against her today. And then Kanisi, I love also. She was like an easy single for me last time. But I don't know. This is a step up. And she had an easy lead under Javier Castellano last time. I think too big of a step up. Not that I want to talk anyone off of price. I'm going to lean on the 3 Eminent Victor. This is a horse I actually did not like going into the Lake George last time because I just wasn't that impressed with her wild applause. I thought she sat a really good trip off a big speed duel, and I kind of downgraded that effort. Having said that, it did come off a layoff, and maybe she actually needed the race despite winning. So in the Lake George, I wasn't really a big fan of hers, and I thought she ran best. I know Dolce Zell had some trouble in the stretch, but Dolce Zell saved all the ground, and she had a little trouble in the stretch and was able to get through. But Eminent Victor stumbled pretty badly at the start. It didn't cost her a lot of momentum, but it had to mess her up a little bit. And I just thought that she ran really well in that race. She was 2 to 3 wide. I thought she finished well. I'm curious to hear what you say because I'm sure you're very prepared. You watch the replays. I thought she was going to go by Dolce Zell. I always say I don't really care about the gallop out very much, but as they were hitting the wire, I thought she might pass her. If not pass her, she was right there with her. She wasn't losing ground. So I thought between the little wide trip and the bad start, I just thought she was better. And where Dolce Zell has kind of leveled off a little bit, maybe, I think Eminent Victor, the 3 horse, is still improving. So that's what I'm going to go with and lean on in this spot.
Yeah, I think it's one of the difficult things for me in watching trips is determining how much they really matter with regard to today's race. And I agree with your assessment of the Lake George. I think that Eminent Victor did have the tougher overall trip than Dolce Zell. Even though Dolce Zell had that spot of trouble in upper stretch, she ultimately did get through and saved all the ground, whereas I think you summed up Eminent Victor's trip very well. She had a few things go wrong at different points of the race that maybe each one in and of itself is not a big deal, but when you add them all up together, probably cost her the victory, just given how small the margin was at the end. But, how much would she have won that race by if things really did go well? A length? I don't know. I'm not sure how much superior she really was to Dolce Zell, even though I probably would lead in that direction that she was last time. And I just kind of have the general question of whether or not I want horses coming out of that Lake George, because going in, it seemed like a weaker race than this. I know you're I guess the captain of the Dolce Zell fan club, but I feel like she was coming out of some lesser performances for Chad Brown among those that are in this race. So those horses coming out of the Lake George probably do have to step it up a little bit. That race got a nice speed figure. We saw one run back that didn't do so well, but maybe a horse that didn't get the right setup next time. That Mott horse who was the speed, Al Kahira, I think. So we'll see how horses do out of that race. Clearly, if you're picking against With the Moonlight, you're probably considering a Chad Brown runner because he has 4 in this race, half the field. 2 of those are the ones coming out of the Lake George. A couple others are coming out of the Belmont Oaks, where they were beaten by With the Moonlight. The one who obviously ran better that day was Consumer Spending, but I don't know, am I making too much of it to be concerned about the kind of trip that she's going to get over this turf course where you want to save ground? Manny Franco is a jockey that I don't think is always so adept at saving ground on the turf, and she's going to have to come from so far back. I just have trouble of the 3 Chad seeing her working out the right trip.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, first of all, that the Belmont Oaks was a better race. To me, McCulloch is better than these horses other than With the Moonlight. Those are the 2 horses, I think, of the females that are the best here. Obviously, McCulloch's not in the race. But I just was against Consumer Spending last time, and I thought she saved ground, had a really, really good trip last time. So I don't see why I would bet her in this spot. Maybe it's a little easier spot, but I don't usually worry too much about trips because they're so unpredictable. I know people kind of laugh at me, but when they're, oh, there's a lot of pace in this race, I'm like, yeah, that's true, but it's New York. Half the jockeys don't go anyway, so it's it's sometimes hard to predict. So I'm not a huge fan of Consumer Spending. So she got the great trip last time, and I mean, is she going to get a better trip this time? She can't get a better trip, I don't think. So I'm kind of against Consumer Spending here.
Yeah, I went in a different direction to the number 6 Haughty, who I made my top pick in this race, and she's one that I would want to use if she's around the 9-2 morning line. We'll see how they bet this race. That she's a horse that did kind of have a following last year. I'm hoping people jumped off the bandwagon because of her Belmont Oaks performance. I did not like her at all coming into that race. I just personally thought she was a horse that wanted no part of the 1.25 miles. She just didn't seem like that type to me. But she had run really well last year. I think it's debatable if she stepped forward so far this year because it's hard to read too much into that Penn Oaks, which was run over a really boggy turf course. But I'm going to draw a line through the Belmont Oaks last time. I just didn't think that was the right spot for her. She was also never on the rail that day where I think you wanted to be. So I expect a better performance from Haughty here. And I think this rider switch to Joel Rosario was a little bit interesting because I agree with you. I don't want to get too caught up in the trips in a race where the pace scenario looks so murky and it's hard to be sure that anybody is going to get the kind of trip that you're drawing up on paper because so much of it is going to be dependent on intentions and rider tactics. So I do like to have Joel in that situation because he definitely seems like one that's not afraid to kind of think about a race a little bit differently than everybody else in the jocks room. And Chad Brown usually pegs one of his horses to go forward when he has some multiple runners in the field. And if I'm looking through them, I'm guessing that Haughty is the one that's most likely to get a atypically aggressive ride for her, just given who's named on her here and the fact that she has been successful racing close to the pace before. So I'm hoping they go forward with her. I'm not sure about that, but I just generally like her turning back in distance and feel like she's training a little bit better coming into this race. So I kind of tentatively pegged her as the one that I want to try to veer against with the Moonlight with. But I'm not going to be shocked when with the Moonlight does well in this race. I just feel like off that last victory, she could get over bet. One more horse that I want to mention that's kind of a little bit of a pet of mine that I think just is underrated and is likely to get the right kind of trip in this race is the number 2 Sail By for Leah Giamatti. Probably she's not this good, but if you had to peg the most likely early leader in this race, it probably is Sail By, and she's going to get that coveted position down towards the inside. Don't love her stretching out in distance, but I thought she ran pretty well last time, and she's a horse that just generally can outrun her odds in these races, so she's one that I do want to have somewhere in my tickets.
Yeah, I want to talk you out for her. 20-1.
Let's move on to the next stakes in the sequence, race 9, sticking on the turf course, moving over to the Melon, and going 5.5 furlongs. It is the Smart and Fancy for the fillies and mares. Another super competitive race. I had trouble making a morning line for this one, I'll be honest, just pegging a favorite or determining who the public was going to go towards in this race. I will say, Change of Control, who I did make the tepid choice at 7-2, to me, she's a horse that just kind of never gets as much respect as she really deserves. I mean, she has been short prices a few times out of town, but I mean, just given her overall body of work compared to this field, she is an established top-level turf sprinter, and I feel like some of the others in here, they've had their moments of glory, but they haven't kind of stayed there, whereas Change of Control, she's just so reliable. And this barn, Michelle Lovell, I mean, she's shipped to Naira a number of times, mostly with Change of Control, and it just seems like her horse has always run well here. She recently won that Saratoga Special with Damon's Mound, and I just think Change of Control is way the horse to beat in this race, and it's the kind of situation where if she is in that 3-1 to 7-2 range, to me that's value.
Yeah, I have nothing against the one Change of Control. Wouldn't be my top pick, but I definitely am worried about that horse. This race features the horse that I love to bet against. The easiest bet against ever is Caravel to me. I hate hating a horse. I feel bad. It's not that I have any animosity toward the horse, but this is a horse who wins when she has an easy lead. She beat a lot of weaker fields when she was younger, I felt, and I love betting against this horse. And she kind of killed me last time because she didn't break well. And if she broke well last time, she would have taken it a little bit to Robin Sparkles, and Super Sensational would have won the race, and I would have made about 30 grand, no joke. So that race killed me. I had to relive that when I watched the replays. I hope a lot of people bet Caravel because they're going to see the bad break. She checked back during the race really badly. So I hope she takes a ton of money, Caravel. I was kind of hoping she would be posting more inside. Maybe people would bet her even more. There's a horse who I like a lot in here, who I'm likely going to single in this spot. And it's a horse I'm curious what you have to say about, because some horses seem to find trouble. And I feel the 6 Miss J. McKay might be one of those horses. But this is a horse who I've loved for a long time. 2 back, she got a crazy, crazy wide trip, had no chance. I loved her last time, and she just had a nightmare trip. She got steadied twice really badly during the race. She had to close wide, and she was gaining. And Robin Sparkles just walked on the lead, I felt. So there was really no pace to close into anyway. So I'm all over Miss J. McKay in this spot. I'm always afraid to either single or really heavily bet closers because they need a trip. And you saw what happened to Miss J. McKay last time. But to me, this is, I don't want to say it's an easy race. It's not easy, but easy how I'm betting it. Miss J. McKay for me.
Yeah, my one worry with Miss J. McKay, and I agree with everything you said about her. I loved her last time at 6-1 and was just kind of pulling my hair out watching that trip. I do worry that she's a horse that was a little bit of a last time was the time, and we missed the chance with her when she was that nice price. I pegged her at 4-1 on the morning line here. I don't know how they're going to bet this race. I know that last trip was one that a lot of people saw, and sometimes people love to bet back the obvious trips at Saratoga, whereas I thought her bad trip at the Intercontinental was not so obvious because you really had to kind of wash the head on to appreciate how wide she was on the turn that day. So we'll see how much money she takes in this spot. I kind of went into this race all prepared to pick her. And then when I sat down to look at it and compared her to Change of Control, I just kind of kept coming back to this idea that I think Change of Control is just a better horse. And if they are similar prices, as I pegged them on the line, if I'm right about that, I'd rather have Change of Control. Now, if Change of Control is 5-2 and Miss J McKay is around 6-1 again, I would much rather have Miss J McKay at that price. But I agree with you that she is a horse that if she can get a clean trip, like she did 3 back in that license fee, that she is the kind of horse that can win a race of this quality. She's just had trouble in her last couple of starts. Didn't feel like it was her fault last time, just kind of got in that bad position in behind Caravel, who I guess it really was Tyler Gaffaleone's fault for putting her in such a precarious spot heading into the far turn that day. But I do think that Miss J McKay is a major player in this race. Is there anybody else? I mean, you said you were basically singling her, so I guess the answer is no, but is there anybody else you were looking at in here? Christophe Clement has a couple of other runners. You've got Robin Sparkles, who did win that Caress last time, but feels like she's supposed to have some more company on the front end this day, so I, like you, imagined there would be some pace in here.
Yeah, no, well, I'm going to be against Robin Sparkles and I'm against Caravel. So a lot of my betting will be determined by the odds in the race. But assuming the morning line is accurate here, and we'll have to assume that because you're on the show. No, um, you do a great job. So I'm sure the morning line is fairly accurate. Since I will be betting against those horses, I'll definitely be betting this race vertically. And Miss J McKay will be on top. I might move her to second in some bets also. But the other horses, you mentioned the one horse Change of Control I'd want to use at least 7-2 there. The 8 horse Lady Edith, who came out of the Caress also. That's a horse I would use. I just think Jay McKay's better. But I thought ran well in the Caress. Again, there really wasn't a ton of pace. I know a few horses were able to close some, but I didn't think there was much pace. So I was impressed with her ability to close there. And who else do I have? Too Sexy, who is coming out of the license fee May 1st. That was off a long layoff. She got off to a slow start, about 1 or 2 lengths. She kind of got cut off a little bit there. Otherwise, it was kind of like an even trip for her. But that was off a layoff. She can step forward, second off a layoff for Clement Rosario. She's already a 5-year-old, so I don't know how much better she's going to get at this point. But I really liked her race in the Floral Park on October 17th of last year. It's 3 back. So I think she has a shot here at a little bit of a price. And the only other horse I'm going to use on my tickets is the 7 Illegal Smile, who I didn't love her race at Keeneland, that allowance race, just because I thought she had like the perfect of perfect trips then. But last race in the Intercontinental, she did all right. She was 2 to 3 wide in that race. There really wasn't much pace when Caravel was able to kind of walk on the lead. So I think that horse can improve too. So I'm kind of leaning on Miss J McKay, who's a 6 horse. I'm going to use the 1, 5, 7, 8 in supers and triples, mostly underneath though, Miss J McKay.
Yeah, we have pretty similar notes on all of those horses. The 2 that I'd be looking to back up with behind the 1 and the 6 would be the 7 and the 8, Illegal Smile and Lady Edith. Lady Edith, she's kind of like the opposite of Caravel in that Caravel always takes more money than she really is warranted to, and Lady Edith never does. She's always a generous price and is just a horse that kind of has made a history of outrunning her odds. So I think you want to pay attention to those horses because for whatever reason, the public doesn't latch on to them, but they'll win a big race every now and then and pay a nice price. Let's move on to race 10, the Grade 1 Alabama, the feature race on this card. And Eric, I'll just throw it right to you. Are you trying to beat Nest or not? Does she just look too good for this field off her smashing victory last out in the coaching club?
Well, for those who do listen to my show or know me, I'm always trying to beat favorites. I almost never pick a favorite, but I'm not going to try and beat Nest here. I've liked Nest since she was a 2-year-old. I think I said in September of last year, that's my Oaks horse. It didn't quite work out, but kind of had the right idea there. I'm not going to try and beat her. I don't know who you'd beat her with. I guess I'm sure you'll talk about Secret Oath. I don't know what happened last time. I liked her going into that race almost as much as Nest, but I just don't really have an excuse. A wide trip, but I mean, Nest totally outran her. So if you can make an excuse for a Secret Oath better than I can, and I guess Gerrymander is the 3 horse who could improve, but this is a horse who's coming off of a perfect trip pretty much last race, a very good trip. Again, third off a layoff, the 3 could improve, but I'm probably not trying to beat Nest here, so I don't really have too much to say.
Yeah, I couldn't do it either. Nest off her last victory. It just seems like she's taken a step forward, and nobody else in this division has gone with her or is going to be able to match the improvement that she's shown over her past couple of starts. I mean, I even think, in addition to the coaching club, her Belmont Stakes is maybe a better performance than I think it got credit for at the time, because I know the buyer came back a little modest for the Belmont. To me, it feels a little low. We've seen multiple horses run back out of the Belmont now, and almost all of them have significantly improved their speed figures. I'm also talking about Skippy Longstocking and We the People, who came back and ran kind of a shockingly fast, I believe, West Virginia Derby a couple weeks ago. And Nest came out of that excellent Belmont performance and was just utterly dominant over Secret Oath in the coaching club. I mean, she always has given the impression that she's a horse that will appreciate added ground. I think she confirmed that in the Belmont Stakes. So this 1.25 miles of the Alabama is supposed to be right up her alley. And kind of along those lines, I've never really thought that more distance benefits Secret Oath. I mean, to me, 1.16 miles is ideal, and then she just kind of has to hang on for the last 16th of those 1.125 races. The stretch out to 1.25 miles, even if she had been in great form, just bothers me with Secret Oath a little bit. And based on the way that she ran last time, I think you have to be a little concerned that Lucas had her ready to peak in the springtime, and she just has not gone on since then. So I have trouble seeing her as the right alternative, and I guess you could take a look at Gerrymander as kind of the now horse that's up and coming off her victory in the Mother Goose last time. But I agree with what you said. She got a perfect trip that day. That was the best that she had achieved up until now. I don't want to give a horse too much credit for beating Shahama and Juju's Map, who I think have proven themselves to be just okay. Maybe more distance is supposed to benefit Gerrymander because she is the younger half-sister to that marathoner Lone Rock, but she's also by Into Mischief, so I don't want to put too much stock in that pedigree. I don't know. I just could not really latch on to her as the alternative, so I'm just kind of wound up leaning pretty heavily on Nest like everybody else.
Yeah, and while this is probably not a great vertical betting race for most people, unless you don't like Nest, I might take a swing and just try and beat the second and third choice, Gerrymander and Secret Oath. I think Secret Oath might be going the wrong way, and we mentioned a couple times how Gerrymander had that perfect trip. So, I might try and bet Nest on top of it and even throw in the one Scratch Cat and maybe the five Nostalgic as kind of like two horses underneath that I would bet Nest over.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I question the quality of Nostalgic overall. I think that Gazelle she won was a little bit weak in retrospect, but she does feel like a horse that really wants added distance. She just is one of these gallopers that feels like she's going to run all day. So if others are stopping at the end, I'm not going to be shocked when a horse like that can run up into second.
Yeah, and she was in that four-way speed duel, but last time with Nest and Secret Oath. So, and I think she has right to approve. Where I think Secret Oath might be going the wrong way, she's probably going the right way, Nostalgic. So I don't love the horse, but as an alternative, that's a possibility.
Let's close things out with the final race of this sequence. Race 11, it is a claiming 35,000 non-winners of 3 lifetime going 1.16 miles on the inner turf course. We've got a full field of 12 signed on, including some also eligibles that could possibly draw into this race. We'll see. But Eric, in a lot of ways, this race kind of feels like the key to the sequence because being right in this race is not the easiest thing to do. It's so it seems. There are a lot of ways to go. And I think you first have to make some decisions about the two big class drop downs that I imagine are going to take the most money. Maybe you could say 3 of them because you've also got Box and Score on the outside who kind of also falls into that category. But I'm mostly talking about the number 4, Wicked Fast, and the number 7, Aviano, who, if they bring their best allowance form to this race, they're probably too good for this field. But I think you do have to have some questions, especially about Aviano after he put in such a poor performance last time.
Yeah, one thing to think about Aviano, he cost $775,000, and they're giving him up for 35 now. He's had some races you can go by it, but he had one dirt race. It was in the slot. He ran against Folsom, who's a decent horse, an ethical judgment who came back to win that race. You would think if they spent that much on a horse, wouldn't you want to try him on the dirt, maybe like a fast dirt track before just totally giving up? So to me, it's not a great sign. I know his owners, they probably have a ton of money and it's like a drop in the bucket, whatever. But I don't know. If you're looking for a reason to bet against a horse and the horse is coming off a bad race and then drop, I know the 7 can win. But if I have Nest in the sequence, if I have some other short prices, this is a favorite I'm probably leaning against. And personally, I would much prefer the 4 Wicked Fast. This is a horse who at least had kind of a wide trip last time against Better, didn't embarrass himself against Better, and kind of a more logical drop to me here against weaker. So they claimed him for 50,000. It's not like they're giving up $1 million here on the horse. So out of those two, I definitely would prefer the 4 Wicked Fast. I just don't know if those two are better than everyone else or not, and I guess that's something that people have to assess for themselves.
Yeah, I feel like they have so many obvious things going for them in this race, the superior speed figures, the dropping class, that, they're going to have a lot of play going through them in this race, and they feel like the kinds of horses that could be shorter prices in multi-leg sequences. So I think you do want to keep an open mind coming into this last race, because there are a lot of horses that might seem like they're a cut below, but that you can make interesting cases for, and, we can go through a few of them. But I mean, just to kind of wrap up those two horses you were talking about, I agree with everything you said about Aviano. I will say, did not get a good trip last time in that he was wide in a rail-dominated race, and it just looked like Flavien Prat never exerted an effort. I think that was the first time he had ridden this horse, and it almost looked like he was kind of half considering pulling him up, like the horse wasn't traveling well. And now Irad Ortiz is back aboard him, so maybe he's just kind of an odd horse, and the familiarity of Irad is going to benefit him. I kind of couldn't make up my mind about him. The optics of his last race kind of gave me some mixed signals, and I don't want to be relying on a short price, but I'm having mixed messages about a horse. And, Wicked Fast, he's okay. I thought that N1X win 2 back was against a somewhat weak field for the level, but he still ran a nice race, and I think a performance like that will make him pretty tough in here. So like you, I wanted to rely on him a little bit more. I briefly mentioned the number 12 Box and Score, who I personally don't like at all in this race. I think he needs a lot more distance than this to be effective, and I know he's got some big speed figures from the past, but I'm just not sure that he's really able to run those competitive races anymore, so I wasn't really enamored with him. But if you're looking beyond those three, you can definitely find some prices in here. Were you able to make a case for anybody else? I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Well, luckily for me, I'm very thin in a lot of legs. I'm singling Nest, Eminent Victor. I'm either singling or at most going too deep there. Miss J. McKay, I'm basically singling for the most part. So what I'm going to do in the pick 5 probably is spread very deep in this race, but then I'll press with the horses I like the most. So I'll maybe have 50 cents, almost all of them, and then I'll have $1 or $2 ticket to the horses I like more, I find better value. So I don't have a strong opinion here. I don't want to come on and talk like I love this horse, and I just don't have a strong opinion. This actually, other than being on the turf, it reminds me of an Oaklawn race, because I feel at Oaklawn you have all these horses dropping, and it's kind of, you're guessing, is the horse just better on the drop than these, or is something wrong with the horse? And I just hate races like that. The two horses that I kind of came up with, other than the 4 Wicked Fast, the 6 horse Saratoga Flash, who he had a pretty good trip last time, I thought. Was a little tight in the stretch. I don't know if you watched the replay and maybe you have some thoughts on it. I thought maybe had a little trouble in the stretch, just running against better horses. I mean, the horse was coming off of decent speed figures that could win this race, and he was 31-1 in that spot. So that tells me that the horse was in a much, much tougher spot. So I can kind of ignore that. And this is probably, or definitely, an easier spot other than the top, couple of horses if they can run. So I thought Saratoga Flash has a chance here. And the other horse that I have a positive note on is, I just don't know if the horse is good enough, is the 8 horse. I don't even want to try and pronounce this. Barnegat Light, maybe, for Junior Alvarado and Tim Ham. This horse was up on what I thought was a pretty sharp pace last time, was pressed pretty hard by a long shot, a 36-1 shot, who ended up fading to the back. I don't know if it means anything. The horse probably wasn't that great that was chasing him, but anytime you can put a horse away like that, it probably is a good sign. So I just upgraded this horse's last performance. It was at this level, and you're much better with determining the quality of the field. So maybe you can speak to that. But if it was it was the same level, so it was a similar level. I thought that horse ran well. And if the class droppers are not the same as they used to be, I think Barnegat Light is the best of the horses who's been running at a similar level.
Yeah, I think those are both some interesting alternatives. I do have Barnegat Light somewhere in the mix as well. We had all the same notes about him. I feel like that quality of that 35 that he ran in on July 22nd was a little bit weaker than this, but I feel like that opinion is somewhat mitigated by the fact that he might have run the best race that day, because he was setting that fast pace that did kind of fall apart. So I think that he's dangerous in here, and there's not a huge amount of speed in this race, so he might be able to go forward and get to that coveted inside position on the inner turf course. So I think there's definitely a case to be made for him. As for Saratoga Flash, he's the kind of horse where price would really be my guide, and you can't see the prices as this is the last leg in the pick 5 sequence, but He's a horse I've never been the biggest fan of. I have long had this opinion that shorter is better for him, and he kind of blew that up in my face when he won going a mile and a 16th back at Belmont, but I felt like he benefited a little bit from a slow pace that day, and that helped him get the trip in a race where nobody closed. I just don't love the way he finishes generally going these longer distances, but I get that this is a slight drop in class and he's got the speed figures to fit. I mean, I kind of have a bomb in this race that might just simply not be good enough, but is a horse that I'm kind of married to giving a shot to. And that's the number 5, El Mayor, a horse that I've long thought needed to be on the turf, even though his form on the grass may not look that superior to his dirt form at first glance. He did show some improvement when he first got on it back in the end of last year at Belmont, running okay in kind of a surprisingly tough maiden 40 for the New York breds. And then he spent the winter racing on the dirt, actually showing some subtle improvement for the John Toscano barn. Finally got back on the turf at this level last time on May 5th at Belmont. And I know that race came up a little bit slower from a buyer standpoint, or if you look at most other speed figures, but that is kind of this crazy race where if you look at all of the run backs coming out of it, almost everybody has run back and done run significantly faster speed figures in their subsequent starts, with plenty of next out winners. One of them did win on the dirt. That was a great workout, the 5th place finisher. But I mean, a bunch of the others came back on the turf and just took huge steps forward from a speed figure standpoint. Even the winner, Be Here, I mean, is a much better horse than you typically see at the claiming $35,000 level. And El Mayor, he finished right at the wire with Land Biscuit, who was a horse that came back to win with an 80 buyer, a horse that would be very competitive in a race like this. And I just think that he showed that subtle improvement on the turf that a lot of people aren't going to regard as some big step forward. I don't love that he's been off for 3 months since then, or maybe a little bit more than 3 months, but they're coming back in what's a pretty ambitious spot, so I like that. And I don't mind having a jockey like Julien Leparoux on because he's not going to attract that much attention towards this horse. And I think Leparoux is going to ride this inner turf course the way that it needs to be ridden. He's a jockey that likes to save a lot of ground, often waits too long doing so, but I think he's going to be on the rail. So I just have to take a shot with El Mayor, and he's going to be probably 15, 20 to 1 or upwards of that.
You have to say in this podcast because you never hear horse players talking positively about Leparoux. So that was very nice of you. Can I just ask you one more horse?
Sure.
The one horse, American Pure, who had a nightmare trip last time trying the turf. Do you give this horse any shot? Because that's a horse I'm definitely going to be using. I can't say I love, though.
It's funny, when I was initially going through this race and he was the first horse I looked at and I saw the conditions, I kind of pegged him as an interesting horse. Drawing the rail, getting on the turf. I know American Freedom hasn't had a ton of success as a turf sire, but I've seen a lot of connections running his progeny on the turf, so maybe that just means they're not good dirt horses, but I mean, it seems like a lot of horsemen look at these horses and feel like the American Freedoms are turfy. They've also done that with Union Rags, and that's been a huge failure for them, so I don't know, maybe that's not a good sign, but I thought he was interesting off his last trip, and there is a little bit of turf pedigree on the bottom side. It's just as I continue to look at horses in this race, it feels like a pretty tough spot for a horse to try to make his turf debut that really does need to take a step forward. So I would rather go for more of a fuzzy that's not going to take money because of connections like the 5. But I mean, I could see the case for a horse like American Pure, and I mean, he could be in that 10 to 12 to 1 range. So that's a look at the races in this pick 5 sequence from a handicapping standpoint. Eric, I know we talked a little bit about ticket construction along the way, but I do want to kind of go back over it and recap because I feel like this is the kind of sequence where some people might fall into the trap of playing this the same way that everybody else does, when they kind of look at things and start to put their tickets together and, they're heading into the 7th race and they see that Echo Again is opened up at even money and, he looks so live on the tote board, so you're afraid to go against him, so you lean heavily on Echo Again, and then you've got With the Moonlight, so she looks like a little bit of a standout. You might use her with the Chads as the backup, logical there, and then you peg the Spartan Fancy and the last race of spreads and Single Nest. What's the problem with constructing a ticket that way?
Constructing it that way is everyone's doing it, so you're not going to get paid very well even if you're right. So it's always good to kind of zag when they zig and zig when they zag. Like for me, my advantage if I have one in the sequence is going to be the Smart and Fancy race, where I think based on, especially looking at your morning line where everyone's kind of the same. I think a lot of people are spreading that race, and I'm just leaning on Miss J McKay. So if I'm right, that gives me an advantage. So if you're out there and you can peg a race where it looks like a spread race and you can single or even go too deep in that race, you have a big advantage because you're doing something that the other people are not.
Yeah, when I go into a sequence like this, I often try to ask myself the question, not am I trying, or how do I win this, but what do I want the winning tickets to look like if I'm right? And I feel like you have to kind of have some idea of how this is going to pay if you hit it, because just trying to hit it, I mean, it's I think a trap that some people fall into where they end up covering a lot of chalky combinations that they don't feel that strongly about. Not that I'm advocating playing against favorites in every single leg, because there are clearly some that look pretty tough to beat in this sequence, but I feel like you do have to kind of put together enough sequences that give you that positive expected value, as is the name of the first horse in this sequence, so appropriate that I would use that term. But no, you do want to find the right sequences that are going to offer value based on your opinions. Would you agree with that assessment?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, do you really want to just say you hit a ticket when you get with the moonlight and even money? You have Nest at 1 to 2 or 1 to 5. You have that Pletcher horse in the last race, maybe at like 5 to 2, 2 to 1, and another chalk somewhere. Maybe in the first rut, like the Asmussen horse goes off even money. What's that going to pay? And how often are you going to hit? If you spend $50 on a ticket like that for 50 cents and it pays $150, yeah, that's exciting. But are you going to hit that every 3 times that ticket? Is it worth it? It probably isn't. So, no, I absolutely agree with what you said.
Yeah, and just personally for me to just kind of wrap it up, when I'm playing this, I would try to take a good look at the tote board in race 7 and kind of view it from the standpoint of the what Eric was saying earlier, that you want to kind of assess these workouts in comparison to the price these horses are. Just because Echo again might be coming into this race with a couple of B plus workouts doesn't mean that he's a cinch. And there might be horses that have some B rated workouts that are value in this race. That DRF clock report that my colleague Mike Welsh puts out is a great tool. I personally don't have the opportunity to use it that much because most of my deadlines that for the morning line or writing are due before I get to see it. But I do try to workouts, and I always take a look at the clock report before I put together my own wagers or kind of do the final check on things. So it's definitely something that's worth checking out. And you might have some horses in this race like the number 1 expected value, or maybe even one of those Shug McGahee firsters, even the number 2 Good News Rocket for Bill Mott, that have just decently rated workouts but get totally ignored on the tote board. So you might want to kind of rejigger your play as you see how they're playing this 7th race. And as far as the rest of the sequence goes, we had some agreement in that Smart and Fancy, the middle leg. The next race, though, the 8th, the Lake Placid, I wanted to lean a little bit on Haughty. I want to use With the Moonlight. I'm afraid to use the term defensively because she is a favorite, but I mean, I do think that she is probably the most likely winner of this race. I just didn't think she necessarily had to win. So, I mean, I wanted to primarily focus on the 2 of them with a little bit of that long shot sail by that I mentioned. I know she's not the most likely winner, but I feel like she is one that I would want to have on my tickets if I'm right about some of my value opinions in the other legs, given the price that she's going to be. We like the same horses in the Smart and Fancy primarily. I'm a little more strong on the number 1, Change of Control. Not trying to beat Nest. I think for the purposes of this, she's basically a single in the Alabama, and if she loses, she loses. And then in the last race, I would have a lot of my play going through that 5 El Mayor, who I just have an opinion about, and we'll see if I'm right about him. But of the favorites, I really do think that Wicked Fast is very much the one you want, so I would use him strongly as well. And I would use that horse that Eric mentioned, Barnegat Light, and I'll see how bloated we get here. But Aviano is a horse that I could use, though I would want to have a lot more of the play going through the other favorite, Wicked Fast.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. Since I'm leaning on Eminent Victor a lot in race 8, and Miss J McKay in race 9, and Nest in race 10. Like I said, I basically have 3 singles in a row. I'll probably end up spreading some in the first race, but the way I play, I kind of like to press my ticket. So maybe I'll use 5 horses in the first leg in race 7 for 50 cents, but then I'll have 3 of them for $1 or $1.50, and maybe the one I like the most at the value for $2 or $2.50, because this is not going to be a very expensive ticket. I'm probably more focused on the double from race 8, where I'll be betting an eminent victor into Miss J. McKay double. And then I'll also be betting that ninth race with Miss J. McKay. As I mentioned at the time, people can go back and listen, but I'll put Miss J. McKay on top of like 3 or 4 horses, trying to beat Robin Sparkles and Caravelle.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think pressing tickets is something that doesn't get discussed enough. Often, racing analysts like myself, we just try to give out a winning ticket, and that's that, kind of playing everything for the same base value. And, it can be tough to convey that nuance when you're trying to give tickets out to people. But I think pressing tickets is something that, real horse players really try to do. And you want to hit your strongest opinions multiple times. And I feel like that's something that doesn't always get conveyed to the average player that's just starting out trying to play these pick 5, pick 4, pick 6 sequences.
Yeah, I mean, if I love Miss J. McKay and he wins, and a few of the other, or she wins, and a few other horses I like in the sequence win, I want to make sure I have more than 50 cents. Maybe if it pays like 50 grand, I'm lucky to hit it because it was like my 5th horse in one leg and my 5th horse in another leg. But yeah, no, you definitely want to be paid when you're right, and that's one way to do it.
Well, Eric, I really appreciate you coming on this podcast. Hopefully this was an enlightening discussion, going a little bit more into the ticket construction portion of it than maybe we usually do on this podcast, but that's the reason I wanted to have you on. So hopefully people got something out of this. It probably not the best sequence for which to have this discussion, because I feel like it's one that, it's hard to veer away from that heavy favorite in the Alabama. But as we discussed, there are some ways to maybe try to get a little bit creative in the other legs and extract some value on it. So thanks for coming on, Eric, and just briefly give people a little bit of a plug, how they can follow you on Twitter or, again, find your podcast.
Sure, thanks. It's at BanditsBB, BANDITSBB. That's a Twitter handle, and the name of the podcast is Better Betting. It's basically on all the podcast sites, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you get your podcasts. So thanks, David.
Awesome. Again, thanks for coming on, and thanks to all of you for listening. Remember, you can always catch these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Thanks for tuning in this week. I'll put something out on Twitter about what I'm going to do with regard to the podcast next week. I'll try to put out the two, doing the Pacecast and the Forecast. I'll probably have another handicapper for sure on the Friday next week, with Craig being off, and we'll see. Maybe I'll do something a little bit solo on Tuesday. I'll see how that all works out, but I'll definitely let you listeners know about that. So again, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and make sure to catch the TimeformUS Pacecast coming up next Tuesday.